Hi, I'm Susan Berg and welcome to our first program for 2021. You're watching The Accidental Writer at the Alex Cafe.
And I'm Dick Gross, co-hoster and wearer of appalling jackets and fluorescent glasses. They're both a cry for help. Welcome back after the summer solstice and Christmas. In this program we talk with writers of all types and stripes and look at the business of writing.
Today we have a varied offering for you. Dick starts off interviewing Jane Yule, who's a book editor and has been a researcher for decades. And Hamish talks with Australia's latest Poetry Slam winner. Dick and I will both then talk with Alex Vass about his work on sexercise.
Sexercise. So Alex was so intellectually excited by some research on the weight loss opportunities of having sex in various positions that he wrote a book about it, and then the book was turned into a musical that he produced on this extraordinary notion. So Janie, tell us about your literary past and how you fell into editing.
Well, I come from quite an academic family, and I was always interested in, ideas and things like that. Things like that. I hate that phrase. Sorry. But I was actually living in London and in the 1980s, and I just really wanted to get into publishing. So it was an interesting time. It was 87, and the whole Murdoch takes on the print industry was happening, and everything was going into computerised ways of publishing, and
getting rid of lots of people.
Yeah, lots of jobs. And we were all young, and we were working for this tiny little publishing company that was the first in the world to actually desktop publish a newspaper. So we were highly sought after, which is an unusual experience for someone who's an editor.
No.
Anyway, so yeah, I ended up working.
So you were an editor on that embryonic publication?
Well, this was called PR Week, and it was set up by a real entrepreneur who was quite a Tory, and he decided that the way forward was to actually desktop publish and to get away from hot metal press. So he was the first person in England to do that. So Michael Heseltine, who was then a minister in the Thatcher government.
Remember him well? Had beautiful hair.
Yeah, they called him Tarzan. And anyway, he owned the biggest private publishing company in Britain, of course, and he bought us out. So we all ended up working for a Thatcher minister, which delighted us to no end. No one was more surprised than my mother.
So the big question here is, what is the role of editing in professional writing?
Well, I think it's actually about designing. I see myself more as a designer, I guess. So you get this manuscript, and then it's up to you to help mould it into something that is more easily communicated. So yes, it's quite good. I mean, I am a pedant, so I quite like getting commas and going, oh, what's that comma doing there? I'll move that and shift this over here. But generally, it's about helping people. May
surprise you that I'm not a pedant.
It actually helps people to communicate, and you're shaping an entire document into a form that people can more readily understand.
So can I unpick that word design? It's the look as well as the words.
Well, for me it is. In the area that I chose to work in, I work a lot with Aboriginal communities as well. So researchers have in the past gone in and decided what they wanted to research with Aboriginal people. Whether or not the community was interested in that was really not a bother for them. So over the last 20, 25 years in which I've been working in this field, we've really changed that a lot into, look, what do communities want researched, and then go and find the people who might actually be the best people to do that job. And then when you've got the research done, how do you communicate it to a lot of different audiences?
So not just taking a finished product at the end, but working through the process.
And you start from the beginning. You say, okay, so what do you want to get at the end? You want a journal article. What does the community want? I don't care if you've got a journal article, but what are we going to give them back? How are we going to communicate all this research that you found that will benefit them? So.
Two shameful questions. The first is, you must see a lot of completely shit writing. Or am I wrong? Is every manuscript you see grammatical, readable and impeccable? or is there a lot of utter unreadable crap out there?
Well, yes. I mean, most people think their manuscript is impeccable and beautiful, but that's sadly not the case. I used to say there's three bits of writing that you get. One is, thank God, okay, yep, no, I can see where they're going with that. That's, you know, that's okay, yep, no, that'll be good. Then there's, oh God, oh, really? Okay, no, I can get it. And then there's, oh, fuck, I don't know what to do with that. It's just incomprehensible.
I think,
you know.
I've been in that position.
A lot of people have, Dick, you're not alone.
Yeah, I've been in that position. It's sort of terrifying because you've poured your heart and soul in, you've got a manuscript that thick.
Yeah.
You take it, you drop it off, you pick it up with anticipation, and they say, look, in a fundamental way, it's wrong, you have to rewrite from the get-go.
Yeah.
It is devastating, but I'm thinking of one particular conversation I had with someone, and I went and I didn't cry, but, you know, of course I'm very manly, but I did think this was the end of my life, and then I did think, she's right. She's bloody right.
Well, what my advice would be is to not finish the manuscript and then take it.
Yeah.
I would be getting someone in the first, you know, do the first chapter and then workshop it and get it, so you know where the pitfalls are and where you can identify what you need to do differently early on, because otherwise it's really disappointing. And I also, you know, I think in one way it's great that people can self-publish now, because people have got a creative outlet and they love writing, and it doesn't have to be a bestseller. No one has to read it, really. I mean, big deal, you know, but it's just that idea that if it's not published, then it's not worthy, and that's not true either. However, if you do want it to reach a wider audience, whether it's paid for or not, it does have to be well written and clear, and that's where the editing and publishing side comes in.
And there is a lot of stuff that is of dubious worth that...
Oh, yeah. And in academia, it's no different, you know.
Yeah.
You think, well, you read this and you think, well, who cares? Like,
Well, you edit a lot of academic manuscripts.
Oh, yeah, a lot.
Please tell me that PhD candidates are impeccable writers with pristine grammar.
Yeah, that would be a lie. Most people have pretty terrible grammar nowadays. My mother, who, bless her soul, would say I had terrible grammar. So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting. So I loved grammar at school because it was sort of like arithmetic.
Yes.
You just applied the rules. We did stuff that no one does now. Scansion,
no one teaches it now.
parsing, subclauses, all that stuff.
Do you know who the best people at grammar are now? People who've learned English as a second language. They know
Is that
it all.
right?
Oh, yeah, their grammar's so much better than ours, you know.
Well, my thing was that I was great at grammar, but I wrote ungrammatically because it didn't transfer from the exercise on the board, on blackboard as it then was, to, you know, the written word.
No. Well, and it's hard, you know. I mean, I think writing's incredibly difficult, and the thing is that, you know, because everybody can write, everybody feels they should write. And I sort of think, really, can't you just, you know, not everybody has to. It's like, I love painting, but I'm not going to go and, you know, I can paint for my own pleasure, and that's fine. And it's with writing, it seems that you have to then get it out into the world. Well, you don't really. You just write for your own pleasure, and it's fine.
Well, I write emails. Can't I write a novel?
Well, you can write a shopping list and then an email. Yeah, next day you go, oh, bugger it, I'm going to write a novel, you know. And there is a bit of that, and yeah, and again, I would always say to people, just write, it's great, but if you're really serious and you really think this is going to, you need to get this out, then start early and get help with it, you know.
I would sort of conclude by saying this. Everything's changing in publishing now. Publishers are almost sort of non-existent. Self-publishing's taking over. Everyone's writing something and no one's reading it. But with all of that mammoth change, the editor hasn't changed.
Yeah, I think what I would say about the editor and editing process is that it's always been a very female industry. And I think because of that, a lot of people don't really take editing very seriously. They'll say, oh, yes, no, I've had it. I looked at it, I did a self-edit, and you read it and you think, you really didn't. You've got no understanding of the process or what editors do. So it's always been a very undervalued profession, I think.
All my editors have been women.
Yeah. It's very rare to find male editors still, which is sort of crazy, you know, but it's the helper role, you know, it's the sort of the handmaiden, you know, like with nursing and childcare and all those sort of girly
Well, it
professions.
is part of the caring professions in a way.
Yeah, it is, because you're actually nurturing people and a manuscript along, you know, and you're helping people to express themselves. So I think that's always been a bit of a downer for editors. So no wonder we're sour-faced.
That's not true at all. You're a total party animal. Anyway, thanks very much for talking with us and unlocking the secrets of editing. For those people who are interested in writing, it's absolutely fundamental.
Oh, thank you very much.
Well, Alex, sexercise.
Yes.
This is a fantastic topic for people like me who are just a little bit immature and rude. Let's start with the basics. How did you come to write this book?
How it started was originally I wanted to self-publish a book, but I didn't want to lose money. So I put my head together, well, what doesn't lose money? What's interesting? Sex and exercise. So I came up with the idea of sexercise. So I hunted around, I found these statistics of how many calories you lose during the acts of making love from a university in Ohio. And I kept laughing, I thought, that's very funny. This should be a comedy, this should be a comedy book. Because it was way out there. And I thought, you really lose that many calories? And then I was speaking to a couple of friends of mine, one was an illustrator, and we laughed. She said, she drew a little drawing, she said, these should be two characters doing your book. I said, that's a good one, why don't we do the book? And so we sat down over many, many nights, and they over wine and me over water, and discussed this book, and we wrote it. And it was over the facts of this information we had on all these calories, the calories you lost during the act of making love, and we turned it into this book called Sexercise.
So did you try it out yourself and make sure that these?
I think a lot of them were tried
correct?
out prior to that. They were
Prior.
just yeah.
So you were
page 24 is a winner.
You're a
and if you get the book, you need to buy the book because page 24 is a winner.
Look, okay.
It's almost 800 calories.
800.
So you need to look at page 24.
So what is page 24? What's the position on page 24?
I don't know if I can say that live, but it's actually multiple positions. But what was funny about it was the fact that it actually sold a lot of copies. It was at that time, at that day, and since about 24 years ago, it actually sold, I always say it sold 5 copies and my mother bought 4, thinking that it was a colouring in book because of all the characters. But it actually sold thousands of copies and became a very popular book for a coffee table book that Christmas. We're quite, when we sold for $15 a book, and it went like hotcakes, and we self-published it, and we delivered it to all the bookshops ourselves and sent off the bookshops. And before we know, we're sending it overseas. Then we did some sex trade shows, and they went like hotcakes. Sex trade shows. We did the Sexpo and all those, and that was amazing for us to just selling this one book.
So what this story tells me about you is that you're an entrepreneur. That you nothing to do with sex. That you're an entrepreneur. That you wanted to write a book. Lots of people do. you wanted to make sure you didn't lose money out of it. Lots of people do. So you made some strategic decisions in a very business-like entrepreneurial way.
We did, and had fun along the way. We were able to have fun doing it along the way. And we were taken quite surprised by the reaction to the book. So we put up a website, and we had more fun recording the noises and the voices for the characters than we did for the book. And we were surprised at how many hits the website had. So Malcolm Cook picked up the book and said he wanted to produce it into a musical, and I said good luck, and he brought Derek Rowe around, and Derek Rowe performed. Derek Rowe spent 3 months writing it. He performed the musical live in front of me, and I was just flabbergasted how good this was. It was one of the best pieces of writing of musical theatre I've seen in a long time. It was modern and contemporary, and it had modern issues about relationships and on all levels. And I teared up because the music was so fantastic, and I said we have to do this. Then he went away for 3 months and wrote it again. I wrote the second act and came back and performed that, and that was it. I was hooked. And then Malcolm said to me, well, where are we going to stage this? We want to stage it. And I said, well, let's look for a theatre. In the meantime, we decided to do a workshop production, which we did at the Gasworks for about 2 weeks. But after a week, it was ready. So we employed a number of major actors and musicians, and we sat there.
With that workshop performance, did you charge for entry?
No, we didn't. We only specifically for investors. So what we did is we workshopped it and we ripped it apart and put it back together. And in those workshops, you rewrite the script and do things. And Derek was wonderful. He was amenable because I used Kate Whitbread, one of my partners in film, who's also a dramaturg, to actually rewrite, make sure the dramatics worked in it. And it was a great. Then the piece just really came together. Then we realised that the rest of it will be workshopped as we actually rehearse the piece itself when we get into it. A number of the actors stayed on board. Some of them had other jobs, so they didn't. And then we were looking for a venue, and all of a sudden I said, look, I'm tired of looking for one. And then by chance, these buildings here in St Kilda came up. They were the ex-Palace Cinemas.
We are in Fitzroy Street, in the Alex Theatre.
Yeah, and these buildings came up and they were cinemas, and I thought, I'll just rent them. And I'll just put a couple of seats in. Who's going to know? I'm going to put a stage in. After a couple of $1 million worth of expenses and refurbish, I had to buy the building, so we bought the building and then really refurbished it. And then the first show that opened the theatre, which was Theatre One next door, was Sexercise. And it was going to be a hard sell, always going to be a hard sell, but I wanted a homegrown musical. I wanted something that was made in Melbourne, made in St Kilda, and with local artists that produced it and local writers that wrote it. It has to be something of ours that maybe we could export one day to Off-Broadway. And we pitched it as an Off-Broadway style show. The difference between Off-Broadway and Off-Broadway is Off-Broadway is 100 seats, up to 100 seats. Off-Broadway is up to 500 seats.
And Broadway?
And Broadway is anything above 500 seats in a theatre. So Off-Broadway, and these theatres were specifically built for off and off-Broadway. So it's smaller, more closer, intimate theatre piece. And there's no commercial venue like this in Victoria, let alone the country, that has 3 theatrettes that you could put a show in at any style of stage show you could do. And so, but Sexercise opened the place, and it was just thanks to the book. And the interesting thing was the book sold more out the front than the program. People would go, I've got to buy the book, I've got to buy the book. The book would have outsold the program by 10 to 1. So we kept printing books.
So I just have to rudely interrupt here. I've seen what Malcolm had to, one of your producers, or the co-producer, had to say about it. And he said that he took the book, he liked the idea, but liked the title. And the book is nothing like the musical.
It's nothing like the musical.
So the musical is a
modern today, up to date, about relationships. And it was hysterical as well as touching. But Derek just has this way of writing that's, as I said, he's the most underrated writer I know in this country.
Well, he worked on my musical.
And you know what he's like. You know what he's like. He comes up, he writes musical. And,
prolific.
Prolific. And unlike most people, he's actually got a fantastic voice as well. I mean, he performed all the original songs himself. Derek's just spent writing. We spent 10 years producing Jungle Book the musical with Malcolm, and it's been 12 years now. And Derek's just rewritten the musical. He wrote the original music. We've just Chong Lim, which is John Farnham's MD. Chong Lim's just reorchestrated the musical for us. And next year we're looking at opening a concert version, touring Australia. Then we'll go off to Broadway, hopefully, with the new Jungle Book musical. But Derek's writing, and it's modern, it's hip hop, it's jazz, it's everything. It's just fantastic. The songs in it are absolutely phenomenal. We've got this talent in this country. We're not utilising it. They're not getting opportunities to show what they can do. So hopefully this is what this venue was for, and other venues. Again, we don't get the supports in the arts sector to do that in the first place. We've always had a plan, and I think maybe it was a little bit beyond its time. And what Derek's done over the last 2 years is rewrite it. We've made it a bit more compact. We do want to release the thing overseas, basically Off-Broadway in New York. It's a perfect show for that, for New York, for an Off-Broadway production, which could run there for at least 4 or 5 years, 6 years, 10 years. You've got shows that run there forever because they're just nice little shows in little theatres with only a cast of 6 or 8. And hence the book would sell over there as well at the same time. And as I said, this book outsells the programs at the front door.
And there was quite a lot of merchandise. I was actually there. I saw the show, and there was all sorts of merchandise, from T-shirts to singlet tops and vibrators, and so the book was it.
A lot of shows don't sell. I mean, I produce lots of shows, and in this theatre, I've produced at least 20 shows, and often the small shows don't sell much merchandise. When I produce shows like Fiddle on the Roof with Topol, which I've produced around the world, I can sell $30,000 or $40,000 a week of merchandise.
So did you produce a Topol?
I produced Fiddle on the Roof with Topol in 1998.
He was in
the Regent.
The Regent,
that was my production of Fiddle on the Roof. Also London and other places. In fact, I've got Hyman coming back to do a movie next year with us. But going forward, it's going to take time to get back in. You've got shows starting like Come From Away is starting early in the year.
Yeah.
You've got Cursed Child opening again starting early in the year. They're starting to come back. But it's going to take a while to wind these people back up.
Well, one thing that worries me, what the point of my question is COVID has changed habits.
A lot.
So, you know, I had to go to an AGM yesterday, and I did that by walking 10 feet to my office.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean about theatre. I mean, it's easier just to go to the Zoom on theatre, which TV.
The personal experience is different. See, you can't beat a live performance. Every night is different. Every performance is different. And the reaction you're getting from the crowd is different. That's one thing you'll never beat. It's like going to a rock concert. You can't see a rock concert on TV. You can see it on TV, but you're not in there with the vibe, and you're not bouncing around with the...
No, I completely agree with you, so but this is a risk.
This is a risk. Last time I was in New York, I was talking to Susan Hay. She runs United Artists and a number of other organisations, and she manages a lot of these artists. And the discussions everyone's going into now is, how do we pay the artists involved? There's another level of discussion too, because they're getting filmed, so that's going to, do they get a part of the streaming? And then you also, in America, with the unions, the crew have to be part of that income as well. And there's all these other discussions that are opened up when we're talking, so we're still talking about those things in the future.
Well, we better wind it up there. It's been absolutely terrific to speak to a live producer of a show that I just loved and venerated. I haven't seen Sexercise because
it's coming back.
Been and gone in Australia, but it's coming back.
Yeah, it's coming back.
Good luck. Yeah. Fascinating.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Hamish Danks Brown, and I'm introducing a segment to the accidental writer at the Alex Cafe program called Spoken Word Spotlight. It gives me great pleasure that our first guest for this segment of the program is Ren Aleksandar, who last month became the national champion of the 2020 Australian Poetry Slam, which is an annual event backed by the state libraries and other literary organisations. Hundreds of people enter it every year. There are heats held in the cities and regions around Australia, followed by state finals, followed by the national final, all of which this year had to take place online because of the pandemic. Ren, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you, Hamish?
Good to see you.
Yes,
it's been a long time between live performances. Mm-hmm. So, Ren, you won the 2020 Australian Spoken Word Championship only last month. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about it?
I'm still on a bit of a roll with it, hey. I was just on the phone to Miles Merrill, who runs Word Travels, today, and yeah, it's unfolding to be a pretty magical year next year, and yeah, it sinks in sometimes, and then other times it hits me in waves, and I kind of have a bit of a giggle, and then yeah, so it's still fresh.
So now that you are the national champion, what is in store for you next year with all of that?
Yeah, it's going to be pretty huge. I'm still learning what's in store. Like, I know that I'm going to be performing at a whole lot of writers' festivals all over the country, which is super exciting. Facilitating space, and I get to host the heats for the Australian Poetry Slam. I get to teach in regional New South Wales, and as an English teacher, that's very aligned with my purpose. So everything's just fallen into place, and I could not be prouder and more excited. So
no, it's wonderful what you've achieved.
Thank you.
You only really emerged on the scene less than 18 months ago.
Yeah.
How did that come about? What drew you to spoken word? And
I've always written.
Mm-hmm.
I've always written. As a librarian, as a teacher, it's my thing. But one day I remember standing in front of the mirror and these words just sort of came bubbling out of my mouth. And I was like, I think this kind of sounds like a poem. And so I just sort of went with it and saw where it went. And then I was like, I think I want to read this out loud to people. And it was a very new feeling for me. And I just sort of went with it. But it took me about 4 months for me to actually pluck up the courage to go to an event. And then the first slam that I competed in was at Griffin Speak at the Melbourne Spoken Word Festival last year. Mm-hmm. And I actually sat in my car for 45 minutes before the event started, just trying to talk myself into it. I was sweaty, I was so nervous, and I was really scared that I was going to mess it up or just embarrass myself. But I actually won. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. I remember hearing about you after the event.
Well,
like, Aleksandar, who's she?
Yeah.
Total newcomer. Right. But it's great. I mean, that was less than 18 months ago, and now you're the national champion of the Australian Poetry Slam scene. And that's in spite of a year when live performance poetry has been totally disrupted by the pandemic. I mean, last night I performed at an event in Fitzroy, Passionate Tongues, and that's the first time I've been on a public stage since March.
It's crazy, isn't it?
And it was like getting back on the bicycle, except you're using wheels of words.
Yeah, actually, I like
and
that.
it felt a bit wobbly. I'm not on Zoom. I'm not on some online platform.
And people suddenly become 3D and they pop up, and you're like, wait,
they're
I've only
right there in
seen
front of
from
me.
here.
Actually, I can't mute them.
Yeah.
I can't it was all.
Yeah, actually.
So it was interesting being back, in at a performance event after 9 months out of it.
I know. It's funny because like time feels kind of elastic, doesn't it? It's as if like the year where nothing but everything has happened.
Exactly.
It's very strange, yeah.
So what sort of poetry did you perform for the Australian Poetry Slam?
I'm very much in a space of self-love, to be honest. So really celebrating my journey into myself, my journey into my body as a woman. And honestly, I performed a period poem.
Right.
And I performed a poem about finding yourself. Sounds kind of cheesy, but obviously went all right. But yeah, I love those pieces. I wrote them in states of pure bliss and pure satisfaction with myself, and I wanted to celebrate those journeys on a virtual stage in whatever capacity I could. And I was surprised. I didn't think that the period poem would be received very well, because that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But I think it was, who was it? Was it Hunter S. Thompson or someone cool like that who said, if you go into a room and everybody likes what you have to say, then you haven't done it right. So yeah, I felt pretty good about that. And yeah, my last poem, it was super fresh piece. I think I wrote it a few days earlier. So yeah, in a space of deep gratitude for that work.
Wow, no, that's fantastic. I mean, you've come so far very quickly, and you've got a busy year ahead of events and programs. And you've recently launched a new initiative called Wordcraft.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Which is more along the lines of mentoring.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Poets and writers. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Absolutely. So it's my life's work. I'm so excited to be doing this work. Wordcraft is all about nurturing writers to overcome their blocks and complete their projects. I really deeply believe in like the transformative healing of finishing a manuscript. There's something happens in the body when you finish a project that you've committed so long to, and I felt that, and I want to share that with as many writers as possible. And you know, if this was something that I could have done a year and a half ago, 2 years ago for my own manuscript, it would have been something I would have dived into. So I would just want to offer that to as many writers as possible. And the writers I'm working with at the moment are brilliant. It's so exciting to help other people work on their craft and to work on their relationship with their art. I think that's a really important space, and so I'm really excited to serve there. So
thank you so much for coming in today, Ren.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honour.
We're just going to look at an excerpt from one of your video poems, For a Boy.
Yep, awesome.
What's going on? My synergy with myself was disrupted, and I do not appreciate being interrupted. I'm not designed to resign to your deliverance and succeeding of your pseudo-ignorance to what's going on. You're here. What's going on here? Do you mean to believe that I would continue to perceive you on that pedestal I carved for you where you perched and prayed on top, where you'd swing for me like that height was a branch and my spine was the tree that you clawed all up on? Scrape me down like bark with your round claws, spit me out, wouldn't feed me to your spawn. I'm not proud of that. That you had time to stalk all over me, caused my mind to fracture reality, although I must confess, I was a bit obsessed with this idea of us, of all of us. Forming this bond so I could start to move on from a chapter that I left unrequited. Unrequited was the desire to leave, but I did it for me, and here, years later, that chapter I still grieve, and I gave you my time for you to conceive all the things that I learned. How I realized, you don't always get what you think you earned, but I am trying to do my best, with all that I know that I have, with words that I recite daily, all thanks to my dad. He says there are 3 reasons why people enter your life. A reason, a season, or for life.
Well, what an incredible show, Dick.
Another one in the can. So, one of the spooky coincidences is that Alex produced this musical and Derek wrote it, and he actually helped me with mine. He did some dramaturgy on my musical. So it's a small world in St Kilda, right?
I mean, what an incredible thing to look at making into a stage production, you know?
Well, it's not my first impulse about sex and weight loss, but there you go.
But, you know, you don't know Alex the way I do, so it's typical Al.
And we also had Australia's Poetry Slam winner, which I think was sort of amazing that our embryonic show can get someone with such stature onto the show. It was great.
Absolutely, and she's done so well, like in 18 months, just starting to write in 18 months to becoming a Poetry Slam winner. You know, kudos to her, she's done well.
And finally, but firstly, we had Jane. She's an editor, but as I said in my introduction, you know, you can't get rid of editors. You can self-publish any crap on Amazon, and the only thing they insist on is that it's professionally independent editor.
Which even makes total sense. But I thought, you know, what was interesting in relation to the editing process, my editor from a firm must have just loved it, because I just said, here's the book, do what you want. And they ripped out 10,000 words and I couldn't have been happier.
It's a lot, isn't it?
It is, but it was the right move. It was a good move. Editors know how to tighten a book. They know how to get rid of the words that just aren't necessary, and it really makes it a tighter, better
And
read.
I have to say, look, they would have taken out much more than that after the first draft of one of my books.
Oh, they would have taken out 95%, Dick, but, you know.
They had to leave me with something.
Your dignity.
Yeah.
Here's to your dignity.
Thanks. And see you next time.
We'll see you next time.